If you've ever felt overwhelmed trying to analyze a stock, this video is for you. See, just a few short years ago, I was probably like you, trying to analyze stocks by browsing Yahoo Finance, reading a bunch of Reddit posts. Every once in a while, I'll open a 10K to try and figure out what's going on and ended up lost. But now we have ChatGPT. I can feel your skepticism, and you're right. No, it doesn't get everything right, but it takes what used to take a few hours to do and contracts it into just a few minutes. So if you've ever wanted to figure out if a stock is a buy or sell before the price runs up on you, stick around and I'll walk you through the process to use ChatGPT to figure that out. All right, let's go. So let's start with the real company that everyone knows, Apple. Up 156% over the last 5 years. It's a stock that everyone knows and loves. So we can check ChatGPT's output with what we know about the stock to verify that we're getting good information. So we start with a very general question or prompt for ChatGPT. Give me a 1-paragraph summary of Apple's business model and revenue streams, as well as its customer base. This is where we would start if it was a stock that we did not know anything about. So it's the right place to start. So here it gives us its revenue for 2024, 391 billion, tells us where the revenue comes from, the products it sells, and then it tells us about its services division, which now makes up almost $100 billion, or 26% of its total annual revenue. It tells us about its licensing fees, which is the commission that it gets from App Store users or creators of apps. It tells us about Apple's strong brand identity, over 2 billion active devices worldwide, and it gives us a sense of what some of the recent challenges have been with the business. Could we have gotten all of that information from Google search? Probably, but it would have taken several Google searches to get this summary of its revenue, the products it sells, the segmentation of its revenue between service and products, some of the risks associated with the business, the number of active devices it sells. So with that one prompt, which took less than 30 seconds to get a response to, we have a quick snapshot of the business, which would give us a sense of, is this a business that we might be interested in investing in or not? But it gets more impressive than that. I can actually have ChatGPT analyze Apple's financials, which is something that would take hours to do if I were to put all the numbers in a spreadsheet and try to analyze them one by one. Let me show you how to do that right now. So all you need to do is go to a tool like Yahoo Finance, go to the Financials tab, use whatever snapshot tool you have on your computer, take a picture of the financials, save it to your computer, attach it right here to the prompt. Make sure that you've typed in the prompt. In this case, I told it to analyze the financial metrics of Apple and pull out any key insights that I should be aware of, especially outliers. Let's see what it gives us. So it gives us its top line growth. It calculates its gross margin for us, which we would have had to do manually. Calculates its operating margin at 31.8%. Tells us what its net margin is. Talks about its EPS growth from 2022 through the trailing 12 months, which is what TTM means here. And then it talks about its record high R&D spend, because it looks at its current spend and compares it to what it's been in the past. And then tells us what its market cap is, trailing PE, its trailing price to earnings ratio, its peak price to earnings ratio. And then it gives us an insight saying it's elevated compared to its historical norms. Talks about being expensive from a forward PE perspective. And then its PEG ratio at 2.02 indicates that Apple is growing slower than its valuation suggests. I mean, this is all information that it pulls out for us and does the calculations and puts them all on the table for us to evaluate, along with some insights for us to analyze. And then it presents us a table of the key outliers and takeaways. R&D spend is at all-time highs. We know that they've been investing a lot in AI, and so that makes sense. The operating margin is really strong. The valuation ratios are expensive compared to historical norms, and the revenue growth is relatively modest, so roughly 4.5% on a year-over-year basis. Its PEG ratio near 2 means that investors should be cautious and growth might not justify the valuation. All of that took less than 2 minutes to summarize. Well, we don't stop there. We keep going with our analysis to see what ChatGPT has to give us. I ask it to dig a little bit more into its financials, and I ask it to summarize the growth rate, profitability, and financial strength in 3 bullets and compare to industry averages. So it gives us Apple's growth rate in comparison to the industry average. So it's below the industry average. And the insight there is its growth rate has lagged behind the technology industry. So it summarizes Apple's growth rate compared to the tech sector's growth rate, and then gives us an insight saying that Apple has lagged the tech sector over the last few years. But from a profitability perspective, it's a much more profitable company than the average technology sector investment. And then it tells us that it's a relatively strong company. I don't really know what the Z-score is. Maybe you do. But it indicates that it has a very low risk of financial distress, which is what we know about Apple. They've got a ton of cash in their balance sheet and very low debt, which translates to a low risk of financial distress. All right, so we dug a little bit deeper into its financials. We could do a lot more with that and move in multiple different directions. But what I'd want to know next, if I were considering investing in this stock, is what are the risks associated with this business currently? And so I just asked ChatGPT, list the top risks for Apple for this year, 2025. It's important to put that actual date just so that it goes out and looks for information for this year and not last year. That's just a trick I've gotten to learn about the way ChatGPT works. And so it lists out the key risks. The first is the tariffs, which we're all aware of. Apple makes the bulk of its iPhones in China for distribution around the world and to the United States, although it has started diversifying away from China, but that remains a risk. In fact, the tariffs has increased their cost by $900 million, which could impact its overall profit margin. Then they've had some challenges from a legal perspective. So in the United States, they've had challenges against their monopoly of the App Store and how they charge fees to app makers. And there's a sense that they are anti-competitive, both within the United States and outside of the United States. So that's a risk to the business. And Apple hasn't released any new products that would be considered strong or leaders in its class lately. Nothing transformational. They introduced the Vision Pro headset, but those haven't met expectations. Sales have declined in key markets. Their supply chain is vulnerable in part because of the tariffs. And then competition continues to increase, right? So Samsung is a big competitor. Google also has its own phone, and Huawei is a key competitor in the Chinese market. So we've gotten a sense of the key risks from ChatGPT. And based on what we just discussed, does it align with what your thoughts on what the key risks are to Apple? For me, yes. A lot of these align with what I had previously thought about Apple. And the reason I asked that question is we want to validate that this tool can actually provide us actionable insights and do it much faster than we would as we look at it as a sidekick to help us find and analyze potential stock opportunities for investment. And so far, the accuracy has been pretty good. So now we're going to ask it for an opinion. Based on all the information it's been able to gather and all the information that's out there that we haven't been able to get to, but ChatGPT has access to. And let's see what it comes up with. So the prompt I used here was, based on current information and data, is Apple overvalued or undervalued using its P ratio, PEG ratio, and price to sales ratio? And so it provides us with an analysis and puts it in the table for us to evaluate. So it gives us its current P ratio at 32.6. The historical average was 22.9, so significantly higher than its historical average. And its assessment there is that its current PE is rich. Its PEG ratio is roughly at 2.77, fair value benchmark of 1. Again, based on its PE ratio, it feels like the stock might be overvalued. And then from a price to sales perspective, Apple is at almost 8. Its 10-year average has been 5.37. When you compare to other hardware manufacturers, it's significantly above that, but we could make the argument that its brand equity allows it to have some premium. But the assessment here, again, is that it's trading at a premium. Here's a summary of the key insights. It's got a premium valuation based on P and price to sales ratios. The elevated PEG ratio suggests that it might not be growing fast enough into its valuation. However, despite high valuations, Apple's strong brand, its loyal customer base, and robust financials continue to attract investor confidence. So there's more to the stock than just the financial metrics associated with it, and investor sentiment continues to push people into the stock is essentially what this is suggesting to us. So all the information we've gathered so far has evaluated the past of Apple. How about if we wanted to think about what the future of Apple could look like? So for that, I asked ChatGPT this question. Based on the conversation we've had so far, can you present the bull case for Apple stock and the bear case for Apple stock so that we could see both perspectives and then we can make our own decision? All right, so here's the bull case for the stock according to ChatGPT. 1, the services business continues to grow and is currently a quarter of its revenue, and that's a high margin part of the business. Its ecosystem continues to expand and customers are loyal. I have an Apple device myself and I don't think I'm going to be changing it anytime soon, and they've got me locked in. And so that brand loyalty represents a floor in the business. They continue to invest in emerging technology like AR and AI. It's got a strong financial position with a ton of cash on its balance sheet and very low debt. and it has continued to demonstrate revenue growth even in challenging economic times. Yes, the growth hasn't been high, but it's continued to grow, which shows a certain resilience that not every stock has. Now for the bear case. The first one here is regulatory challenges. Apple continues to face increasing scrutiny from regulators, both in the US and in Europe, especially as it relates to how they manage the App Store, which is a big driver for their services revenue. iPhone sales continue to be a really large part of their revenue base. For example, I'm using a 4-year-old iPhone, and I'm not going to be upgrading until something significant changes the product and what it offers. Maybe some AI tools or other features would prompt me to upgrade to the new phone. There are supply chain risks associated with the business today, as we can see with tariffs, particularly with China, and then it's an expensive stock. So yes, it might be growing, but it's growing slowly. And yes, it might be safe, but that doesn't mean that the stock is going to appreciate from here. So that's a key thing to remember. So if you're looking for something that might appreciate significantly from here, Apple might not be the stock that you want to invest in today. And then outside of the US, it faces strong competition, especially because Apple does not really have a low-priced product to serve markets like India and Southeast Asia. So what do you think of this analysis that ChatGPT did about Apple stock? We can definitely do a lot more with it. Like, we can ask it for new sentiment, but we were able to do it in 15 minutes or less. And that's the power of ChatGPT. So why don't you comment below and tell me what you think about this? Will you be using ChatGPT to help analyze stocks that you're interested in investing in? While you're at it, check out this video where I asked ChatGPT to find me 3 cheap stocks that I can invest in now, or this video where I ask it to find me 3 great ETFs that I can park my money in for a recession. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.